Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back into another edition of Keytime Sports. Please like, comment, share, subscribe to Keytime Sports right here on YouTube, Key City Sports on Instagram, and the keyonmillions.co. Here is my profile so that you will know it's me. Here is my media feed so that you will know that all of my segments are right here in this library. And here is my merchandise. We have new merchandise. We are going to be rolling out new merchandise later on this month and for the entirety of the rest of the year. And you can also purchase the merchandise and it will be delivered right to your door. All processing, shipping, and handling is also charged too. So, but the processing and shipping and handling for holiday sales are free of charge. So now let's get to the one team that I'm pretty sure everybody is wondering, are they for real? Are they too young? Can they make it to the NBA Finals? It is the Detroit Pistons. Now, the Detroit Pistons, this is the first time that they have been relevant in a mighty long time. I'm going to go down the roster and I'm going to tell you who is all on this roster. And then I'm going to give you all the matchups, the statistics, and where I see this team ending up at the end of the season. So here's who's on the Detroit Pistons roster. You got Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Javonte Green, Tobias Harris, Ronald Holland II, Kevin Huter, Dennis Jenkins, Isaac Jones, Bobby Clintman, Chaz Leonard, Carius LeVert, Wendell Moore Jr., Paul Reed, Duncan Robinson, Darko Saric, Marcus Sauzer, Toulouse Smith, Isaiah Stewart, and Azur Thompson. Head coach is J.B. Bickerstaff. Now, one thing that I want to say about the Detroit Pistons is last year they had a little bit of playoff experience losing to the New York Knicks. Now, as we look at the current standings, the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks are the best two teams in the Eastern Conference. Now, we get back to the Detroit Pistons as far as statistics, player statistics, and how much their shooting percentage. We all know that the Detroit Pistons are led by Cade Cunningham, and he has 25.3 points on the season. Jalen Duren has 18 points. Tobias Harris 13.5 points. Duncan Robinson 12 points. Azur Thompson 10.6. Isaiah Stewart 10.2, excuse me. Jay Ivy 8.2. Ronald Holland II 8.1. D Jenkins 7.9. Carius LeVert 7.8. Jalen Green, Jay Green 7.1, Marcus Sauzer 5.9, Paul Reed 5.5, T. Smith 5.2, C. Laner 3.1, Bob Clintman 2.1, C. Jones 2 points, Wendell W. Moore Jr. 2 points, and Isaiah Jones 2 points. So this is the entirety of the lineup the entire roster of the Detroit Pistons. Now, there's quite a few question marks with the Detroit Pistons. They are one of the youngest teams in the NBA. Can they go deeper into the playoffs than they did last year? Are they going to be able to hold up? Are they going to be a little bit flustered because of as you get deeper into the playoffs, the series become more and more tight. And we know that this team, one of the youngest bunches in the NBA, they haven't been in a pressure-packed series just yet. Now they had their little experience last year. Now they know what to expect in the playoffs. And I'm going to go a little bit further. Your big three is Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Tobias Harris. But you are going to need, I'm going to say, at least four players outside of those guys to carry the load, because we always know that some players in a playoff series have a bad shooting night. Everybody, and I do mean everybody, has had a bad shooting night, no matter what league you are in, whether it's football, basketball, whatever. You are going to have some bad games when it comes to playoffs, when it comes to the playoffs. But now we see where matchups and everything, and as we can see right now, the Detroit Pistons are the top team in the East. But are they going to be the top team in the East when we get to season's end? I just don't know. I just don't know. I just showed you their entire roster and every player's scoring average throughout this season. But there's some kind of scenario where the Celtics are going to be the top team in the East, and the Pistons, they'll probably be number 2 or number 3, because Detroit Pistons, they are the inexperienced bunch in the East. Everybody else has had at least a couple of years of playoff experience. You got the New York Knicks. Last 3 years, they've been in the playoffs. You got the Boston Celtics. Just won the championship a couple years ago. They were in the playoffs last year. Toronto Raptors, they haven't been in the playoffs in about 3 years, but they have more experienced players than the Detroit Pistons. The Cleveland Cavaliers, last 3 years, they've been in the playoffs. Philadelphia 76ers, I'll be doing a segment on them sometime next week, but the Philadelphia 76ers have had a lot of playoff exits over the past 5 years, and we can go back that far because it's been playoff exit after playoff exit. And then we get to the Detroit Pistons, and I'm gonna go to historical measures, because I know that there are a lot of people that do not know the last time when the New York Knicks were relevant outside of 2004, when they won the championship. So as of right now, I am going to give you all a historical context. So Detroit Pistons, first season they were the Fort Wayne Zoolander Pistons. They were in the NBL. This was 1941 through 42. They were the second best team. This was before the NBA. So 1941, they were second. Then 1942, they win the NBL. And they win the semifinals in the NBL, and then they lose the NBL championship. And then we get to 44. They were first tops in the NBL. They won the NBL championship, Then 45, they win it again, repeat as NBL champions. Then you get to 45 through 48. There were a lot of first round exits. Then you get to 49 through 55. 49 through 55, there were tosses and turns. They did lose the championship in 50. They lost the semifinals in 51. Lost the semifinals in 52. Lost in 53. And then you see a chain reaction here. 54, they lost. Then they win the division in 55, lose in the NBA Finals in 55, lose in the NBA Finals in 56, lose in the NBA Finals, lose in the semifinals to the Lakers. Then we get to current present day between 1957 to the present. They won the semifinals division, lost to the Atlanta Hawks, 59, lost to the Lakers. The 60s are pretty much one of those down decades because they did not make it to the finals at all. 70s are one of those decades for the Pistons where they did not make it to the NBA finals. You see where I'm getting at here? We get to the 80s. The 80s, it seems like everything in the 80s for the Detroit Pistons, they were looking up. 84, you get to the first round. You lose to the New York Knicks. This was when Isaiah Thomas came into the fold. Now you get to 85. You lose in the conference finals to the Celtics. And at this time, we already know that the NBA finals, it was LA and Boston almost every single year for the 80s. Then we get to the late 80s. And then all of a sudden, Detroit, they started popping their collar a little bit, winning a championship in 88. 89, they lose to the Lakers. 88, they won. 88, they lost to the Lakers. 89, they won over the Lakers. 90, they lost to the Knicks. 91, you're getting to the point where 91, we're entering in the Michael Jordan era, the Michael Jordan age of the NBA. So this is pretty much when the Pistons were at their peak, 87 and 88. But by the time 91 and 92 came in, we already knew who had the NBA on lock. So 92, you lose to the first round of the New York Knicks. And then it just seems like everything after that, the team just broke up. By the time the late 90s came, the Detroit Pistons, they were a shell of themselves. And then we get to the point where the early 2000s, we get to the point where, they're making the playoffs on a year in, year out basis. 2004, that was when they pretty much just shocked everybody and won over the Lakers in the NBA Finals. I still can't believe how they pulled that off. Still can't believe it. And then the next year, they go back to the NBA Finals, and then they lose versus the Spurs. And then it seems like since 2006 up until now, it just seems like there's been a chain reaction. They haven't gotten back to the Eastern Conference Finals, let alone the NBA Finals, because 2006, you lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers and a young LeBron James. 2007, you lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers and a young LeBron James again. 2008, you lose to the Eastern Conference representative in the NBA Finals, and that's the Boston Celtics. 2009, you lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers again, and then we get to 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 14, 15, you lose. You didn't even make the playoffs. 2016, you lose to LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. 2017, you don't make it. 2018, you don't make it. 2019 season, you lose to the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. And that was pretty much I want to say the 2019 season, that was pretty much, they got into the playoffs on the last day of the season. And then 2020, we know that was COVID, didn't make the playoffs. 21 didn't make the playoffs. 22 didn't make the playoffs. 23 didn't make the playoffs. 24 didn't make the playoffs. And last year, the Pistons made the playoffs for the first time in almost 6 years. And now we get to present day. Present day, the Pistons are 37-12. And I'm going to get to their schedule. The Detroit Pistons, by no reason they are not a slouch, America, because I'm going to show you all who all they have beaten on their schedule. Now they do have some quality wins. You beat Boston. That they've beaten Boston multiple times this year. They've also beaten Oklahoma City. So you've beaten the Pistons, they've beaten two of the top best teams in the NBA, if not all of the NBA. And as you can see here, they've beaten Orlando Magic. They lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers earlier on in the season, and then we get to early December and late January. This is pretty much recent. So you beat Boston on December 15th. Then we get to the new year. You beat Cleveland on January 4th. You beat New York January 5th. Then we get to the last 3 weeks of the season. You've beaten Phoenix. You've beaten Boston again for the third time this season. I don't know what is going on with Boston, but I will get into them a little bit later on. I have a segment with the Boston Celtics next week. Then you beat Denver. You beat Denver on the 27th, and the Pistons also beat Denver last night. They beat Golden State. They also hung tough with Houston. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Detroit Pistons are relevant, and we got to start putting a microscope on what the Detroit Pistons are doing, because Detroit Pistons, one of the youngest teams in the NBA. Obviously, if they keep this bunch together, they are going to be in the playoffs year in and year out. We are already seeing a team that is pretty much that's led by Cade Cunningham. Their bench production is one of the key parts when it comes to their record and how the way that they have their record. So now we get to a point where we see, can the Detroit Pistons hold up against teams like Boston, New York, Miami, Orlando. Now Orlando, I did a segment on them last week. Orlando and Detroit, they're kind of in the same boat. So I'm just gonna give y'all this potential playoff prediction. I would want to see the Detroit Pistons and the Orlando Magic play each other. I really would, because that would be two young franchises, two franchises with young stars, and that could be a potential Eastern Conference matchup for years to come. And not just that, but we also know that the Knicks are there. The Celtics are there. I don't know too much about the Toronto Raptors as far as can they make it to the conference finals. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing about the Detroit Pistons is the team is young, but they do have little experience. But I just want, when it comes to the Pistons, best part about this season for the Pistons, best case scenario for them is winning their first round playoff matchup and losing in the second round, because obviously when we get to the third round, conference finals and NBA finals, we think that stage, well, personally, I think that stage is a little bit too big and too bright for the Pistons right now. But in a couple years, you'll probably see the Detroit Pistons in the NBA Finals. That's if everything goes according to plan, whether they're not trading players, critical core pieces to the team. Now, one thing I'm going to say is the finality of the Pistons is a team that is pretty much going to monk the game up, make it look ugly. And even last night, now I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna go into my final take with the Detroit Pistons. Last night I watched the Denver Nuggets and Detroit Pistons. Now the Pistons, they had a lead in that game. They had a double-digit lead with under 3 minutes left. And Denver, they cut it all the way down to, I believe it was 5. It was 5. So I believe that you need games like that. If you are a young team trying to bolster your roster and let everybody know, let every spectator in the NBA, and not just in the NBA, but every basketball spectator know that, okay, the Detroit Pistons are a team that we should be looking out for, and they could possibly give New York, Boston, Cleveland, Philadelphia, or Toronto a run for their money. That's what we need to start thinking about, because they have a 5-game lead. We're a week and a half away from the NBA All-Star break, and there's a possibility where, not a possibility, but there is a possibility where the Detroit Pistons can have home court advantage throughout the entirety of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Now, for a young team like that, that is very critical for them. But home court advantage can only get you so far. You got to go out there on those 94 feet and on the hardwood, and you got to dominate on the hardwood. Because Detroit having the best record in the East and having home court advantage and losing in the playoffs, that fan base, a lot of people, they ain't gonna stand for that. They not. So the finality of my take for the Detroit Pistons, I'm gonna look at the remaining part of their schedule, because, like I said, we're at the midway point of the season in the NBA. First 48, 53 games of the NBA season, it's pretty much done. So let's see the remaining schedule for the Detroit Pistons. So tomorrow night you have Washington. That's a tune-up game for the Detroit Pistons. Friday you have New York. Then you have Toronto on next Wednesday. Then you have New York again on Thursday of next week. Then we get into the point in their schedule where they're playing more West teams. You're playing the San Antonio Spurs, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then you play the Cavaliers and the Magic. Then you play San Antonio again on March 5th. Then you play the Philadelphia 76ers on March 12th. You play Golden State on March 20th. You play the Lakers on March 23rd. Then you play a game that is pretty much going to cover a West team, Minnesota. Then you play Oklahoma City again on March 30th. So now we get to Oklahoma City on March 30th. April 2nd, you play Minnesota. April 4th, you play Philadelphia. April 6th, you play Orlando. Then to finish out the season, you play, I'm going to say 3 bad teams to finish out the season. You play Milwaukee, Charlotte, and Indiana. So now, where do I see the Pistons ending up? I could see the Pistons ending up as the number 1 spot in the East, having home court advantage throughout the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. And I could see the Pistons getting past the second round in the Eastern Conference. Now, I'm going to tell y'all something. If they get past the second round, as far as everything that is kind of, as far as everything that all things are pointing to, where now, if the playoffs were to start today, the Detroit Pistons would play the winner of Miami and Chicago, and I do believe that Miami would come out as a winner. So, first round series would be Detroit Pistons and the Miami Heat. Now that series, that potential playoff series, that could go to the limit. I could see that going to the limit. But if we get to a point where experience starts to be a bigger factor in that series, then obviously the Miami Heat will send the Detroit Pistons home. But as of right now, the Detroit Pistons, they are tops in the Eastern Conference right now with a week left before the All-Star break. All-Star break, that is on February 15th. So exactly a week and a half left before the All-Star break. So all in all, the Detroit Pistons, they have set themselves up for success, and I would like to see what the Detroit Pistons can do in the playoffs this season. I really would, because Detroit Pistons, we all know that 3 years ago, Detroit Pistons was just a god-awful franchise, one of the worst teams in the NBA. And you do a total 180 in about 36 months. And now we are talking about the Detroit Pistons and the Oklahoma City Thunder in the same breath, because when we go to records, Oklahoma City has the best record in the NBA. The second best record in the NBA is the Detroit Pistons. So what the Detroit Pistons have done over the past 3 years to get to this point and be just a relevant conversation, and a conversation that we need to start having more and more as the season goes on, is great. But I've already have said this. In the playoffs, you are going to be in some tough situations. Your back is going to be up against the wall, or as I like to use my analogy, as your back is going to be up against the rope, and when the rope gets popped, that means that you've lost the series. So, let's see what the Pistons are going to do. If the Pistons get pressed up against the rope, what they gonna do? That all is going to have to wait until the playoffs come. But best team in the Eastern Conference right now is the Detroit Pistons. And with that is my remaining season outlook for the Detroit Pistons. Please like, comment, share, subscribe to Keytime Sports right here on YouTube, Key City Sports on Instagram as well, and also Millions, the Key on Millions.co. We have live merchandise right there in stock. You can all see it. You can see that I have shirts, sweaters, and even hoodies. Now we are going to be rolling out new merchandise later on this month and for the entirety of this year. So here is my profile so that you will know it's me, so that you always know that the Key is always on time. Here it is. Here is my media feed so that you can look at my segments, clips, and sound bites from previous shows. And remember, everybody, one last thing, the Key is always on time.